Welcome. You are now listening to the Soul Mechanics Podcast. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/soulmapping.life or Instagram soulmapping_life. With your host and personal guides, Aeon and Sophia. Sit back and enjoy as they tune you into practical wisdom for the art of being human. For more in-depth guidance and resources on your personal journey, check out our offerings at soulmapping.life. And now, for those that wish to thrive and prosper living their soul's purpose as spiritual entrepreneurs, check out our brand new soul actualization project at soulmapping.life/actualize.
Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to the second episode of Soul Mechanics Radio. We're so happy you're here with us today. We've got a lot to share. And today we're going to talk about embracing your light and what that means.
Which inevitably, as we were just talking about, also means embracing your darkness.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to go through with you guys today because all of us throughout life have a very unique light, a very unique purpose and expression to share with the world. And overcoming the difficulties of being able to share that with others and how to come from your true authentic self in order to share what you need to share with the world. Yeah, so really when we're talking about our light, let's first talk about, what it means and, what's really been preventing all of us from really embracing who we are and speaking from the heart and sharing with others. Because part of the human condition, which means all of us kind of have a little bit of this, is that sometimes we feel held back or that it's not okay to stand in our light, or we might be perceived as arrogant, or what there's tons of different stories that come with are people gonna judge me, or what are people gonna think? We're really concerned about what other people are gonna think, which kind of in a sense blocks us from being able to be in our heart space. So we're going to talk about that and some practical steps to, start to align with this energy so that really you can get out of the way so that your light can shine.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, a big, strong main point that comes inevitably with embracing each of our own lights is courage, really. As we step into our full expression of who we know ourselves to be deep down on a soul level, it takes a lot of courage, because there's so many things that our mind brings in as steps that will prevent us from doing that. Like Danny said, whether it's what other people are going to think, or it could be past belief structures, it can be perfectionism even. There's so many different things that can come that can get in the way of this courage. And, most of it comes back to where these wounds lie within our psyches, from whether it's, just being born here on this planet in this dimension, or, just experiences that we had growing up.
Yeah, a lot of childhood stuff and the traumas, which are really key points. Our traumas in our life are key points for, where our gifts can be, because we are learning to overcome those things and how to process them and accept them and be okay with it and move forward, and, learning to draw the boundaries so that we're not getting re-traumatized and things like that. But yeah, for me personally, I've dealt with this a lot in my life, feeling that it wasn't okay for me to be in my own light, and that I needed to kind of be in the background and, not really share that much. And it was just really hard. We started doing videos while we were living in Peru, doing different projects. And that was kind of the start of it. It was like, okay, here we go. I need to share with people what we're doing, because we were doing some amazing work and stuff that could help people. And it was a real process trying to get out of my own head and, get out of the fear of, oh, what are people going to think? Always fearing that people are going to judge me, or that something that I say they're going to take a certain way, and then it's just going to like ruin the whole, thing that I'm sharing, or however that shows up. So I know that a lot of other people are also dealing with this, and it's something that's like a practice that you continually work with, being okay with your light, because you're learning really how to love yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And in that process, we come up with like a few steps that we found helpful. It's kind of like a series of processes that we can go through to more fully embody and embrace our light, and explore and embrace our darkness as well. Mm-hmm. And the first step we have is what we call know thyself, right? Because in order for us to fully step into our light, we really have to, at our core, we have to know who we are, and we have to be able to tap into that inner being and really cultivate a relationship with it. Because that's the reason why all of these things happen, is because we disconnect from who we are on that soul level. Yeah. And we disconnect, we kind of create this unhealthy relationship, and there's wounds in the way that we've come to treat ourselves, or that disconnection creates this kind of unhealthy relationship, where it's kind of like when you're in a relationship with somebody else and you mistreat them enough over and over again, then they start to distance themselves more and more, and they don't really want to like come out and shine and connect as much, and yeah. For us to do this, really it starts with the knowledge of ourselves. And this is, in one sense, like I was saying, connecting with ourselves on the soul level, but it's also a knowledge of really who we are. So that also comes with a knowledge of who we're not, and that's where like a lot of these systems that we incorporate into the soul mapping and the soul mechanics come into play, because they give us blueprints of these different aspects of ourselves. It's like, in order for a flower to be a flower, first of all, it has to know, oh, I'm a flower, so this is what flowers do, and this is how flowers act, because
it's in their DNA, it's in their codes.
Exactly. And when we disconnect ourselves from this relationship with our innermost being that's always speaking to us and always guiding to us, or always trying to speak to us and guide us, we may confuse ourselves with, being something that we're not. Mm-hmm. And that disconnection is really the first and core step into any of this,
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with human design or Richard Rudd's system, the gene keys, or astrology, you don't necessarily have to have all of this knowledge, even though it's really, really helpful. But you can just start by tuning into your body, and being mindful. And what that means is like, what are you focusing on? What are you allowing, your mind to really? Is it going into a fear state, and are you feeding that? Because thoughts and different feelings are always going to come through us, but we get to choose which ones we take action on, and really are responsible for our feelings. So I think that this is part of it too, with the know thyself. Are these feelings that you're having, or these thoughts, coming from a place of like a trauma or a childhood shame, or something that you're so afraid to share yourself because you were highly criticized when you were a child, or all of us when we were kids, because of how the world works, and parenting, which I think is getting better in some senses, but we were blamed for things that we did, and shamed and
guilted, and
not really sometimes shown in the right way. We were just being kids and just doing what we're doing, and sometimes we've had this guidance from our parents or other figures in our lives that is not exactly uplifting or empowering. It's more like, oh, I'm a bad person now, or shaming and things like that. So really recognizing if what we're thinking or feeling is really coming from this place of like a pattern, like an old pattern, and evaluating it. Is this thing actually helping me? If I have a pattern in my mind, a loop, which is really what PTSD is, it's like this loop where you can't make sense of something, or you're like, maybe you're blaming yourself for stuff, and deep down you need to know that you're a good person and you're trying the best you can. And no one's going to be perfect, ever. So know thyself is also, about knowing that you're not going to be perfect all the time, and it's okay. Like mistakes, quote unquote, which are really just learning experiences and places for us to have wisdom, are always going to come through. And we can, rather than going into a hole or a pattern when we make a mistake and going into shame and depression, or, maybe we project it outwards, and into anger and rage and attacking others. Rather than doing that, we can really embrace the fact that, oh, that situation happened. Let me see what I can learn. What's going on? Is this a pattern that I need to keep, playing out? And, that's why when you know yourself, you know that you're doing the best that you can, and you just try to help the people in your life to understand who you are as well. So that's when we talk about boundaries and all of these different things. Sometimes we have to teach the people in our lives how we want to be treated, or, who we are. Because especially in the human design system, Ra talks about homogenization, right? So the world, a lot of us, we get homogenized, or meaning we're kind of like whittled down into like this very simple kind of conditioned sheep mentality. And this is throughout our fractals. So when we're talking about standing in your light, it's embracing that uniqueness.
Exactly. Yeah, embracing that uniqueness. And really, like, Danny was talking a bit about boundaries. It's like, in order to have these proper boundaries and structure within our lives, that's, again, is knowing the self, right? Mm-hmm. So the self is the boundaries. It's like, okay, this is who I am, this is what I'm not, this is how I, want to be and how I want to become in my life. And, that brings us to the next step, too, which Danny started to talk a little bit about, which was embracing ourselves, which is also kind of like an acceptance, right? So as we go through life, now that we've come to understand who we are, and we've tapped into that innermost self and that innermost being, we also have to accept who that is. First and foremost, accepting, okay, like, this is who I am, like, this is amazing, this is beautiful, I love this person, like, deeper and deeper levels of accepting who that person is. And this also comes along with it, like a kind of like a practice we can do to embrace ourselves more, like, as we're on this path of discovering and embracing who we are, inevitably there comes times when we continue or fall into these shadow patterns or these wounds that we have, right? Like, whether it's, maybe it's criticizing yourself, maybe it's, as Danny said, maybe it's getting angry at others, maybe it's, some sort of addiction or a food problem or something, right? So in order to move beyond those things, because so many times when we're trying to become better people or embrace some sort of higher identity or soul level intelligence, it comes with this plan, like we're talking about, of like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to work on this aspect of myself and change my diet and change all these things. But then when we make the mistakes or we see the patterns happening, then we shame ourselves or guilt ourselves, or we don't embrace those things as they come up again, and that just leads down in the spiral of further disconnecting ourselves from that core self, that soul level intelligence, because it's kind of like saying to this little child inside of ourselves, like, no, you're not good enough. I don't accept you. Like,
you're not worthy.
You're not worthy. Yeah. Rather than this isn't like a spiritual bypass of like, okay, I'm just going to be okay with, however I act all the time, whatever I eat, however I treat people or whatever. But in the moments when we're working on doing better and we're growing and we're learning, in the moment when that thing happens, embrace it. It's okay. Like, yes, of course I, had this shadow happen. Of course I criticize myself again because it's something that I've trained myself to do. And
it's a protective mechanism.
Exactly. And it's, part of who I've learned myself to be, or, it may even be...
it's like conditioning and programming,
the
homogenization of everything.
Exactly. And in some way or another, those same things that were like, oh man, why did I do that? Why did that come up? Those are where the gifts in the true power lies, are in those little things. And if we can be aware enough of those things, then we can start to transform and transmute them, right? By embracing them in the moment and look for the hidden meaning and the power that those things come with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and a lot of times those patterns that we're playing out, the reason that they're harmful and, cause us suffering and more destruction and chaos in our lives is because they're actually coming from a place that is not us. It's not our true energy a lot of times. It's coming from this conditioned pattern. Well, my parents shamed me, so I'm going to, react to people by shaming them. That's not really who you are. You're just playing out a pattern. So yeah, that's also something to understand about knowing yourself is, are these patterns actually me? Or is it coming from this place of my wound? Because like we said, it is a protective mechanism. So our wounds, if we don't resolve them, and this is why trauma healing and shadow work is so important, is because it affects our lives continually. We either repress it and stuff it down and have all these bad patterns in our lives, like you said, addictions or just depression, and there's like a lump, somewhere. Really, it can actually cause cancer and tumors and all of that stuff. But or it's going to be, we push it outwards as a way to push people away from us, even though that's not what we really want. Everybody really wants to just receive and to give love. That's always the true form. If we focus on that, we can understand that when we're projecting out our anger and our pain and our triggers and our shadows and traumas out on others, we're still not learning the lesson or healing the pattern, because the wound is like a pattern, like a geometry. And if we don't address it and heal it and basically process it, then that's how it's coming out through these either repressed or reactive expressions. And it will continue. We'll keep getting the same cycles. We'll keep getting in the same habits, the same patterns. And then furthering down into shame and blame and depression, when really, if we know ourselves, we know, okay, well, that's not me. I can actually surrender that, release that. I don't need to hang on to this anymore. How do I communicate my needs? Because all of our wounds are normally, coming from a place where either our needs weren't met, or our needs were like, our energy signature was like violated or not respected and not heard. So in this process of being able to stand in your own light and to embrace yourself, your true self from the heart, you're able to also respect others, because this is the thing too. When we don't know ourselves, when we don't know how to stand in our light, we also have a hard time being in other people's light, or like shedding light on them and like giving them credit or giving them the spotlight, or we might even actually feel threatened by other people that are standing up and sharing themselves, or, even they don't even have to say anything. It could just be somebody who's confident in themselves. If you don't love yourself, that's going to be very threatening, or you might feel envious or jealous or shame, because you are comparing yourself to others. And this is the main thing with being in your light. We have to stop comparing ourselves to others. Like, we literally have to stop giving a fuck about these things. Like, really, we have to be who we are no matter what. And it doesn't matter what other people think or what the consequences are, because when you're coming from your heart and your true self, that aspect, that expression that's coming out is something that is beautiful. And it's always going to be coming from a place of love. And it's only when we're coming from this programmed, homogenized, like, societal conditioning and the people in our lives, our families, or whatever we went through, when it comes from that fear of that place and that pattern, that's when it's, something that's going to harm others or harm yourself. So do you want to tell us about like the next step of, so we have know thyself, and we talked a little bit about like embracing that self and accepting when you have like darkness and how to work through it. And then what's the third step?
Yeah, so the third step is embodiment, right? And embodiment really is, so now we know who we are, we're embracing, we're accepting who that person is. Now it's actually taking the steps to really be that person, right? Stepping into the light and taking the day-to-day steps and actions that show that we actually love ourselves and that we accept who we are and that we're embracing it. And that can be so many different things. It could be taking the steps to start that new business that we've been thinking about, or working better to provide for ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves, cleaning our house, or treating ourselves to a bath, or staying on that meditation program, or it could even be going out and interacting with more people, like getting out of our like funk and kind of depression, or our
isolation,
our fear that self might not be accepted. The embodiment really can take form of so many different things, but it's really all about all about taking those ideas and that internal consciousness and beginning to externalize it. And this is really kind of like the masculine aspect to the work. That's where that starts.
It's the mind,
right?
And especially like in human design, for example, and a lot of these systems we talk about really are about allowing the form consciousness, or allowing everything else that is not the mind, basically, to rule the life, right? To give the power back to life, because the mind is not here to lead us, right? So really all this stuff is still just for the mind. It's like, okay, be in charge of watching your mind and being careful with it. That's why we have all this mental pressure to think, is really to take care with what we're communicating, and to do all these things we're talking about, like knowing who we really are, embracing who we are, and getting out of the way. Like, this is how we get out of the way, because everything else is just going to fall into place. We actually don't really need to do anything. It's just we're trying to heal, this collective program of compare yourself to others, be like everybody else, be a sheep. Who are you to stand in your light? You got to be competitive. You got to go out and make something of yourself, like, by yourself, when we're really designed to like function together and build together. And we all have different
Synergy.
roles. Yeah. And we all have different purposes. So it doesn't help us to compare ourselves to others, because you are not that person and you're just hurting yourself more. So embodying who you really are really also is about not comparing yourself to others.
Yeah, definitely.
And embracing that, okay, I am a person that, this is my energy, this is how I feel, this is, all the things that you feel are you, which is really just your heart, your love, whatever you can do to express your truest, highest self in a way that's not putting you above or below people. Because the mind is designed to compare and to make black and white, this and that, divide, judge, correct, look for faults, right? That's how the mind works. And when the mind is not in a healthy position, of course, that's going to be how we see the world and what we're doing with others. So if we're like comparing ourselves to others, automatically what we're doing is putting ourselves above or below somebody. And that's like one of the first things we have to recognize, because you can start sharing your light and being the embodiment of your light in really simple little situations. Just, hanging out with friends and, or new people that you meet. Recognize, are you immediately putting this person on a pedestal, or are you judging them and putting them below you? Because if you're doing that, you're not in your light. You're not in your true heart space. So it's about embodiment for ourselves, but also encouraging and helping others to be their unique self.
Yeah, exactly. And but with, like Danny was saying, it comes down to like the form consciousness, and it's really embodiment in the sense of like, looking at this vehicle that we've been gifted here in this life, and how it functions and what it's trying to tell us, right? Because the vehicle, the body, is really what's tapped in and connected to, everyone around us, our environment, and is what allows us to move and function as a cohesive and a coherent organism with the other people and cells and groups that are on the planet, right? And so something else that comes with deeper and deeper levels of this embodiment is nourishing and working with that form consciousness, like understanding, like, okay, this is how my energy levels work, like this is how the body works. I'm gonna perhaps use certain foods, or like
or
I
not
said,
drink coffee,
right? Or not drink coffee, or
which I drink coffee. I'm not saying it's bad.
meditate, or yoga, or all of these different things that can actually work with the the chemical, energetic, bioenergetic field of the body to help it perform better, to help it heal or regenerate or grow and expand, depending on what it is that we need. And the body here is really what's like creating all of this experience. If we think about it, yes, in one sense, there's the mind, quote unquote, as in like the greater mind, as in all of this is just one substance. But the body is really what's, manufacturing these different chemicals and alchemical experiences that allow us to interpret the table as the table, or
all our experiences.
Right, all of our experiences. So to go from these like ideas in this internal consciousness and externalizing it, again, that goes into like, okay, creating a nice environment for ourselves, creating a nice physical vehicle and nourishing it, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the embodiment also has to do with the actual body,
Yeah, it's like reconnecting to source.
Right.
So if you've ever heard people say, like talking about source energy, which that can have whatever meaning you want it to have, but basically like your original energy, or your higher self, or God, or however you want to, speak about it, spirit. You can even take that, if we look at the microcosm, like what you're saying, like the mind, got disconnected from the source, which is the body, for example, in that part of the fractal. So right. Just like what you're saying, embodiment, coming back into the body, and really feeling the body out and listening to it and nourishing it, like you're saying, is a really important thing. And for those of you that don't know much about human design, or if you do have your chart, which you can look it up for free online at jovianarchive.com and click your free chart. But basically, you'll see white and then you'll see color, okay, on the chart. Wherever you have white, that is where you are receiving the world. That's where you're getting your conditioning and programming. And that's where you have the most potential wisdom. So with this embodiment, we can realize that the information that's coming in that is not us, right? So when we know ourselves, we can know what we're not. And when we see that information coming in, rather than allowing it to condition us into taking some other action that we would normally not take coming from ourselves, we can see that this is coming, in as a place to give us insight and wisdom and another experience of energy that we don't necessarily have to do anything about, unless for this fourth step, like you were talking about, is, appropriate decisions or taking actions once you're in your embodiment, because we still need to let the energy guide us from ourselves. And we can see that like external energy or energy that's coming in that's, from others, rather than trying to identify with that energy, we can start to take different actions from our true inner source, right? From the body, from the form, and make decisions from ourselves rather than from that place of conditioning. So do you want to tell us about like the last step once we're, in our embodiment and we're in our light and we're sharing our heart and coming from love? What is the fourth step for this process?
Yeah, so the fourth step is decisions and possibilities. And so like Danny was saying, this is very close to embodiment, because this is also like an externalization. This has a lot to do with the decisions that we make on a daily basis. But also in general, it's knowing deep down that we made a decision to be here, and the things that are coming to us in our life, we made the decision for those things to happen as well. And what does that mean? It's like, well, a lot of people say like, oh, well, I don't remember choosing to be here or something, but this is generally just due to that disconnection, again, from that true innermost self and that source. So starting with that decision that basically like we chose to be here, and our soul and our higher and innermost intelligence chose us and this life in these situations, right? Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, in possibilities, is the possibilities of like knowing, okay, what's actually possible within this framework, in this experience of choosing who I am in this moment or in this life in general, right? Because, coming from the mind, we go, oh, well, anything is possible, right? Like anything's always possible. It's like, yes, but like kind of not really, because we chose to be here in this particular body, in this life, right? So that inevitably limits some of the possibilities, because it's like, well, it's not really possible for me to be Danielle right now, okay? So coming from that specific choice of being in this life, what are the decisions that I have made and I can make that are going to be most in alignment with my highest soul's intelligence? And a lot of this is really just about being tuned into that innermost authority and coming from that place, rather than all of the conditions and the mind-centered intelligence. To go back just for a minute, to kind of like wrap this all into what Danny was talking about before too, when we come into the body, this is really also a state of coming into the present moment, right? And just coming into the form. I remember, I just had to share because there was just something that was coming up while Danny was talking. I remember for so long when I was originally like first kind of coming into the spiritual path, this whole idea of like ascension, right? And the ascension was of course, this whole experience that I had was amazing, and it was exactly what I needed at the time. But I thought for so long that ascension was like leaving the body, and right, that it was going up and somewhere out. Like I was just going to like pop out of my body one day, and I was going to be flying through some sort of like other dimensions, or that I was going to, who knows, grow angel wings or something like that. In one sense, when we like kind of see through the veil, that is what happens. That's what's already here and what's already happening. But this state of oneness that I was seeking, and that kind of everyone seems to be seeking in the spiritual community or just in life in general, is actually about going the other way and being completely present in the body, because the body is what connects us to everything. So it was about, yes, I went internal, I went so far in this space of like self-knowledge, but then it all came back to okay, well, the oneness is actually about being here and like being present in the now, right?
Yeah.
And then making, again, bringing it back to step number 4, making decisions from that space, from the now, and from like what's possible, and trusting in that self, and really surrendering and letting go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I feel too a lot of this is about, like you were saying, with, we chose our families, we chose this body, we chose this situation. It's kind of, you can think of it metaphorically, like we weren't some other body. I mean, maybe we were, who knows? But like, you can kind of think of it like the energy chose to like express this way, as who you are, the families that you went into. And I like to think about it. Sometimes I use the metaphor of like each person is given a piece of the pie. We have like this whole pie of existence, and everybody has a little bit of the pie. And the pie, you're here to eat the pie and digest it. And the pie has a lot of wounds and a lot of patterns and a lot of traumas that when we eat the pie, we actually eat it. We face the patterns, we face all of these traumas and wounds. We're able to process for the universe. It's like sometimes I think of us as like these organic machines that are extracting things for the universe. It's like, which is our higher self, which is the oneness, and that, like you said, requires us. Yeah, the mining, right, with the mind. It requires us to be fully present, and we can only process these things when we are allowing the form to be in the process, like you're saying, the embodiment and all of this. So part of this, when we're digesting our pie, which is our life path, which is our everything in our life that we need to come to terms with and accept, and knowing ourselves. So all these steps are kind of like in the pie, the knowing yourself, the embracing and accepting your light and your dark, embodying yourself, and then making appropriate actions and decisions. When we start to do that, we're able to like release a lot of the pressure and go to these, quote unquote ascension, is coming from this place of really accepting and taking full accountability, complete responsibility for everything. You are responsible for your, relationships and communication. If you're staying in a situation and you feel like, well, I'm communicating to this person, they don't hear me, they don't understand me, keep working on your communication. First off, are you coming from a place of love when you're communicating them? Also, are you trying to understand where they're at? Because they're probably presenting you with their wound. And then from there, if it's still not working out and the person or situation is just really not conducive for you, something in the universe might be trying to push you into a new space. Maybe that space, which you are responsible for, is not the best situation for you. Because sometimes we stay stuck because of our wounds, because of these, not really accepting ourselves, not embracing and embodying ourselves. We stay stuck in situations that we, keep repeating these patterns of not being able to fix it or change it, and we, just live a life of perceived suffering. And when we know ourselves and embrace ourselves, we embrace and accept the responsibility that comes with that. It's a lot of responsibility. I, for example, have had to learn and have been coming to grips with the fact that I chose my parents. My parents are, loving people. But let's just say that my childhood was a deep initiation for me of, feeling like my needs weren't met and my emotions weren't understood, which a lot of people have this, right? So, and feeling like my space, which is what we're talking about, my light was trying to be like put out, or, I created that situation. I chose that, because that's what the energy was of that was coming through, or that chose to express itself that way. And the way that I've processed it, the way that I've eaten that piece of pie, is by realizing that I chose that, and that it has led me to the wonderful gifts of being able to communicate better with people, to, have more empathy, to realize more about myself, to help others through those situations where they feel like there's nothing they can do, and so I've had to learn to love myself and empower myself, and so that I can help others do the same. So that's kind of how, when we take these 4 steps and we quote unquote digest, and eat the pie, that's what we get. Is we get the gift of being able to help others with whatever it is that you mined or you ate, right? That pie, whatever that pie is also your gift to the world, to the universe. That's your piece of the puzzle that you're here to bring, and that's your light. So a lot of times we feel that our shadows and our darkness are really, this thing that we have to hide, and it's not accepted. Which really, the shadow and the light are actually the same things. It's just a matter of what you are putting your attention on and focusing on. So when we look at the shadow and we see that, okay, there's this darkness in me, I've been projecting my anger at people, or I'm feeling jealous, or I'm feeling, bad about myself, or however we want to express it. When we look at that, we can see that that's an opportunity, that's a gift, that's something that we can look at and learn how to transform it. We're processing that information in order to share that with others, or to just come to peace with ourselves, because we all have this. We all have things we don't like about ourselves. We have fears. We have traumas, we feel like a lot of who we are is not acceptable.
Right.
So we start to homogenize and condition and whittle down, and it's going to come up anyways. The energies are going to come up. Even if you're pressing down your self-hatred and you don't want anyone to see it, or your doubt about yourself, or however it's coming up, that's going to leak out. So when people talk about energy leaks and like these types of things, really it's coming from that place of not looking at what's going on inside you in the form, in the mind also.
Avoiding the feelings of it.
Yeah, avoiding and just trying to ignore it.
Numbing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, that brings up a little bit on more that I want to add to the last step. It's like in those decisions and those possibilities that are coming to us, Danny was talking a little bit about, really like coming to terms with the fact that she chose her parents and those things. And, a great practice that as we come to know ourselves and embrace ourselves, a great practice is really, as these things come in, or it may be looking at the things that happened in the past, or it may be things that come up in the future. Either way, we look at the thing and we ask ourselves the question, like, how does or did this situation allow me to more fully know myself on a soul level? Mm-hmm. Like, how does this situation actually serve my growth and love and self-acceptance? Yeah. And that can take those situations and kind of flip them around from this whole like shadow into the light or whatever.
That's the alchemy.
Exactly.
That transmutation.
Exactly. And, we can do this, simple practices that we can do to really do this work on our own. It could be like looking back through our lives and look at all the things that happened to us, like, but looking at it from the lens of like, okay, if this is a reflection of who I believe myself to be, or who I believed myself to be at the time, where's the lesson in that? Where's the growth? Where's the opportunity to
turn it into light?
To turn it into light and to embrace and embody my soul level intelligence fuller.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of it too, it just was interesting when you were like, look at what happened to us. I was thinking about that right when you said that. I was like, oh, what if we change that to look at what happened through us?
Yeah. Us.
And like nothing happens to us, even though we do feel victimized in a lot of ways, but this is radical responsibility, radical acceptance, that is really essential on the planet. So I think a lot of it too, when we were talking about being mindful, and even that word is funny, like you were saying, mining. So it's like being careful with our communication. You know, like how are we talking about what happened through us? You know, how are we
talking about it internally?
Yeah, how are we talking about it internally, or how we feel about ourselves? You know, that's one of the first things with the alchemy, because the word, right, in the beginning there was light, and there was the word, and you know, if we want to look at like the biblical code and things like that, that's kind of interesting. That shows us how the word is really important in what we are solidifying into reality. So changing your language, you know, allowing yourself to open more by sharing in a different way, and talking to yourself, like what's going on in your mind, or what you're sharing with others about your experiences that may have been hard, you know, not ignoring what has happened or invalidating or minimizing, but putting it in a way and sharing it in a way that's really in the light, and not a victimized pattern, like taking responsibility. And that's kind of the first part of this transmutation of, you know, getting these shadows into a space of light.
I have the most amazing example of exactly what you're talking about. So, you know, with the responsibility that Danny is talking about, in my own path, you know, going through this, what I noticed that responsibility and power are so intricately interlinked with one another, you know. And so it's like people, like a lot of times, like including myself, you know, like been in this space from like, oh, I feel powerless, or like I wish I had more power to control or you know, to create a better world, or to affect change in my environment, or whatever
feeling less limited.
Feeling less limited. And the power only comes with the responsibility, because it's like, if we want things to change in our environment, in our world, we have to go, oh wait, that's my responsibility, I'm going to change it, I'm going to make the money, I'm going to get the job, I'm going to leave the unhealthy situation, I'm going to change my diet, or whatever it is. And what this brought up too is, like, you know, talking about like changing this communication and taking this power back, right? I noticed for the longest time, and there's still a lot of this out there in like the, you know, the esoteric, spiritual, conspiracy theory community. Danny was talking about in the beginning was a word, right? And so there's all these stories now coming out in like ancient history and these different things, that there were these beings, right, that basically they genetically engineered humans, and they've, you know, put us here to mine gold.
Yeah, the Anunnaki.
Yeah, the Anunnaki.
You know.
They put us here to mine gold for them, basically, or like we're like their slaves or pets in the mining gold, right? And so that's so interesting if you think about it in relationship to what we're talking about, right? The mind.
The mind, yeah.
Right. And so if we can basically shift this into a new light and look at like, oh, okay, so we, as these aspects of the mind intelligence, of that level of awareness, right, we are here to basically mine these things within ourselves, within our consciousness, so that we can come back into this state of like, you know, what they call grace. Like, oh, we fell from grace, the fallen angels and all the Anunnaki again and all these things, right? Well, it's much more empowering if we take responsibility and say, oh, wait, I came here as this being, quote unquote, from heaven, and gave myself this mind space piece of the pie, right? So this, all the mind stuff is the piece of the pie, right? And I take responsibility of like, oh, okay, this is what I'm here to mine, so that I can receive the gold of this oneness consciousness of the heart space, of being the richness, the being in the present moment.
That's our cat, Prince.
Prince agrees. He's here to mine lots of gold. I think he's actually a little white lion Anunnaki himself.
Yeah, he's a talker. Yeah, I think it was interesting too, and we'll talk about this more in future episodes about really taking back our power from a lot of these victim states, like you're saying. I mean, we're surrounded by it in our culture and society and world from every kind of genre of being that you could be in, whether it's spiritual or, like you said, the conspiracy theorists and really disempowering programs that are going on in the planet. And I thought it was really interesting too one day when I was talking about responsibility, and we had this whole conversation about like the more responsible you are, that when it's correct response, that the more power you inherently have. And the power is the ability to order things, to take care of things, to help, to, help your family. Whatever the power is really to make, it's like the digesting of the information in a more efficient way, because there's responsibilities. It's like
the ability to respond.
The ability
and adapt.
to respond. Yeah, rather than with the victim pattern, with the victim fear program, what does that do? That keeps us feeling like, oh, something else has something over me. I can't stand in my light because of this. There's something out to get me. Oh, I'm a victim. This happened to me. Woe is me. Which, yes, things have happened, but you have the power through your responsibility to transform it and to make a difference in your life and in other people's lives in a good way. So yeah, I think it would be good to talk like another time about the, because for many years I was into all the conspiracies, which I know that they are not necessarily always conspiracies, that they're, I researched them and investigated them and shared them, and I was protesting and kind of living in this space of fear, so much so that I like left the country, sold all of my stuff. I was like living in this really tiny, dinky, danky like apartment in fear, because I was just so in that mindset of, oh my God, everything's out to get me. We're doomed. Like, the planet's doomed. Everything's screwed. And I was in that low frequency, and I've had to come up from that, which I will be able to share with you guys, my process and how to kind of get into a better mindset. Some things I tell people is that if it's coming from a place of fear, it's probably not correct. If you're listening to a theory or somebody talking about something that's very disempowering and victimizing, it's probably not correct for you, for anybody at this point, because it just lowers your frequency. It's a program. So when we're talking about, being in your space, embracing and accepting your light, that's also like recognizing when there's things that are coming in that could potentially be like darkness, right? So we can look at these perceived quote unquote dark things like, oh, the aliens are coming and they're going to kill everybody, for example, or something. We can look at that and transmute that and turn that into something in a higher, more empowered space. And we all have to cultivate a deep knowing inside ourselves that we have this power. That's the God-like energy of
the quantum.
Yeah, no matter what happens, I know I'm going to be okay. I am not the body, even though we've been talking about being in the body. The body's just my vehicle. So nothing can really harm me or damage me except for myself.
Right.
And that's when people talk about, if you've heard of people saying, well, I'm God, and I've God in me and I'm the creator, because we are these little creators in our lives. And, it's really coming from this total accountability. Like you cannot create, quote unquote, your life, if you're still being in a victim pattern. We all do it. Like I still get into victim patterns. It still happens. And it's okay. Like we don't have to further victimize ourselves when we fall into a victim pattern. We can have grace and acceptance and go, oh, okay, what can I learn from this? All right. And process it, because it's going to come in and you're going to ask yourself, why is this coming in that I'm feeling victimized? okay, maybe I didn't establish a boundary. I didn't, which is not necessarily always the other person's fault. We need to communicate our needs properly, which we all have universal needs. That is something that we will be talking about in further episodes about universal needs and how to communicate them. Because if we can all communicate in a better way, it's going to help us to not feel also, it gives us our power back, so we're not feeling victimized.
Yeah.
So I think we'll definitely be doing a lot of episodes on communication and boundaries, and because all these things kind of work together. We have the ancient systems of astrology and the I Ching and all of these different systems that help us interpret energy, right? And information. That's what energy is. And then we have other systems like human design and the gene keys, and also integrating psychology, because again, we have to examine the mind and get it back into alignment and help the mind work for us, not against us.
Right.
Because it is a great tool. It's the greatest tool that ever existed. So when we integrate all these things, we can come to this place to share our light and to be in our light and accept our darkness and embrace other people's light. Are we empowering them, or are we trying to judge and tear them down and compare ourselves to them and, creating these weird patterns? For the longest time, I had a really hard time accepting compliments. And I know a lot of people are like that. It's much easier for me to... Well, and giving compliments sometimes was hard. Not because I didn't think that the person was doing great, because I actually would think amazing things about other people, but...
You actually felt like you were bad at giving compliments.
Yeah, I felt like, oh God, it's not going to come out authentically, and they're going to think that I'm, it just was a weird program that I had. It was a lot easier for me to criticize, or a lot easier for me to find what was wrong with what the person was doing, which does not help, really. I mean,
that's that reflection, too.
Yeah.
You had that inner criticism going on and not being able to compliment yourself.
Yeah.
And that was, just, again, that's the whole, reflection. And, like I was saying before, that's, once again, if we just look at all these things that happen to us, or that are happening to us, and we go, okay, how is this the reflection? Where's the reflection of our light coming through and showing us, where we can embrace our light fuller.
And being creative. Yeah. And being creative in that space of how to bring light to the other too, when I was growing up, there was my parents were military, Air Force, and so there was a lot more critical energy, I would say, in my household. So I actually kind of was used to that, but I'm very, very sensitive to it still, which I think a lot of people also deal with that if they dealt with family or people in their lives that were highly critical, rather than, because I think my mom also had a hard time giving compliments, and being authentic in that way. So that's why when we look at those traumas, we can also see, okay, my mom, for example, wasn't able to stand in her light. We're all kind of healing and bringing this energy for the planet. And we're all being called to step up, to share our light with the world, and all of us that are willing to do the work and willing to embrace who we are and be authentic. That's all. That's what the light is. It's just your authenticity, your heart, your love. We're all being called to share this with the world, and to be leaders. This is genuine, good, heartfelt leadership that is going to uplift the whole world. And there's a lot of us that are starting to step up and share this energy and encourage others and being vulnerable, with our past and sharing what we've been through.
Sounding our truth.
Yeah, sounding our truth. And so if you're ever doubting yourself, or if you feel like you can't do something, or you're taking forever to do this radio show like we actually did, it took us a little while. just put yourself out there and trust and open your heart and just know that you have these powers within you to transmute whatever comes in and to, be the gift that you are. That's your service to the planet.
Yeah, I saw this great quote twice in the past 2 days in two different places, and it was like, if you're not embarrassed by your first product that you put out, then you didn't put it out soon enough.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just like keep that in mind. Like all of the great and successful people in this world and the people who really shine, they do most things before they feel that they're ready to do them. You're never gonna, it's never gonna be perfect and feel exactly right and exactly, well, maybe it will once in a while, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's about taking that leap and then the net appears, is the ancient Zen saying, right?
Yeah.
Jump over the cliff and then the net will magically appear to catch you.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, if you need any assistance or you want to check out any of our information further, you can go to soulmapping.life, or coming soon for some helpful sacred technologies, the elixir.life. And if you want to follow us on Instagram, soulmapping_life, and on Facebook /soulmapping.life.
Thanks for being here, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for letting us share our light with you today, and we'll see you next time.